psycho, you know that? Do you have any idea how many people you probably just killed? What the?
There's a moment in the Pluribus Season 1 finale that barely raises its voice. No explosions, no speeches, no dramatic music cues screaming at you to pay attention. And yet, once you understand what's actually happening, it becomes one of the most disturbing scenes the show has given us so far. Manousos stands in a small room over a joined man named Rick. Rick stirs, barely conscious, slipping back toward awareness for just a second, and instead of calming him, instead of grounding him, Manousos does something deeply wrong. He screams, not to help, not to save, but to push Rick back under. Rick collapses again, then Manousos places a radio directly on Rick's chest and whispers almost tenderly, "Rick, I know you're in there. Come back." And in that instant, the finale quietly reveals what it's really about, because this is not a rescue. This is a test. Rick isn't being saved in that room. He's being used. And once you see that, the entire finale snaps into focus. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand who Manousos is when he enters Carol's life. This isn't a man drifting through the world looking for connection. He doesn't stumble into town searching for peace, or love, or even safety. He arrives with a mission so rigid, so consuming, that he repeats it like a prayer while crossing hostile terrain. My name is Manousos Oedo. I am not one of them. I will save the world. He says it like repetition can impose order on chaos, like belief alone can make the universe behave. And by the time we reach the finale, that belief has been sharpened by pain. Manousos has pushed his body beyond its limits. He's been torn open by the environment, infected, broken down, and carried back by the very people he fears most, the hive. And that's crucial, because their kindness doesn't soften him, it terrifies him. To Manousos, compassion isn't proof of humanity, it's camouflage. It's another mechanism of control. Every gentle act confirms his suspicion that manipulation doesn't require force, it just requires patience. So when he sees Carol growing close to the joined, when he realizes she's opened the door emotionally, willingly, something in him hardens. Carol isn't just dating one of them in his eyes. She's evidence that the system works, that people can be eased, guided, and absorbed without resistance. Now jump to the finale. Carol sends out that message. Painted, desperate, exposed. It isn't strategy, it's longing. She flirts with death, then chooses life again. And the life she wants has Zosa's face. So when Zosa returns, it feels like hope. And then Zosa collapses. Not suddenly, not randomly. She warns Carol first. That detail matters, because it tells us the joined know when something is coming. They feel the wave building even if they can't stop it. The hive senses disruption before it hits. Carol recognizes the signs immediately. This isn't a feint, it's systemic. Something is wrong. She runs back to Wilson's place. And that's when she finds Manousos standing over Rick. That's the first red flag. Rick didn't wander in. Rick wasn't unlucky. Rick was selected. Manousos brought him there intentionally, the way a technician prepares a subject. And the show keeps Rick almost deliberately undefined. No long backstory, no emotional framing, just a name, just a body, which is exactly the point. The hive erases individuality by making people feel interchangeable, vessels carrying a shared consciousness. Manousos believes he's fighting that, but the method he chooses reveals something else entirely. Manousos has been tracking patterns. He's noticed a signal, a rhythm, a frequency tied to the joined. And every time the hive experiences a mass seizure, that signal fractures. In his mind, those seizures aren't accidents, they're interruptions. Imagine the hive as a constant broadcast. As long as the transmission is clean, everyone stays synchronized. But when the signal stutters, even briefly, something slips through. A name, a memory, a self. Manousos becomes convinced that during these moments, joined people are briefly human again. And that belief changes everything, because once you see seizures as openings instead of tragedies, they stop being something to prevent. They become something to trigger. That's why Manousos screams at Rick, not out of cruelty, but calculation. He's trying to force the system to fail on command. He wants the stall, the buffer, the glitch. And then comes the most unsettling choice of all, the radio, placed directly on Rick's chest, not nearby, not in the background, on his body, because the chest is rhythm, breath, pulse, the physical proof that someone is still alive. Manousos isn't just speaking to Rick emotionally, he's attempting to tune him, treating his body like an antenna, a receiver that might catch the old signal if he hits the frequency at the exact right moment. This isn't comfort, it's forced deprogramming, and the phrase "come back" is what makes it devastating. Carol uses those words as love, a plea born from fear and connection. Manousos uses them as a command, same words, opposite intent. Here's where any remaining sympathy collapses. Manousos isn't ignorant. Zosa has already told him what happens when immune people push the hive too far. He knows the seizures ripple outward, he knows people die, and the finale makes the scale explicit. Another mass evacuation, another genocide-level response. Manousos does it anyway. That's not ignorance, that's acceptance. Rick wasn't a mistake, he was a data point. The experiment fails, Rick doesn't come back in any stable way. The hive reacts, the town empties, and Manousos doesn't look broken, he looks confirmed, which is the most frightening outcome possible, because it means Rick was never the end, he was the first step. Carol sees the cost immediately. She sees the arrogance. A man deciding he has the right to gamble with countless lives because he believes his cause is pure. That's why she doesn't argue. She shows up with a shotgun. No debate. No ethics lecture. Just action. She locks Manousos in a car boot. Containment over conversation. A refusal to let theory justify cruelty. And when Manousos asks her the question that defines him, do you want to save the world or get the girl? It's framed like heroism, but now we understand what it really means. Do you want to save the world my way? With bodies, with coercion, with acceptable losses. Carol chooses Zosa, not because she's weak, but because she refuses to become him. The moment she accepts Manousos' logic, Rick becomes inevitable. So does the next experiment. The hive is terrifying because it takes people without violence. Manousos is terrifying because he can commit violence while calling it mercy. So what was Manousos really doing to Rick? He was attempting to rip an individual consciousness back to the surface by exploiting the hive's seizure glitch, forcing a collapse, anchoring a name, and using radio frequency as a hook during what he believes is a brief window of freedom. But emotionally, he was proving something to himself, that he can treat a person as a tool and keep going. And once someone crosses that line, once suffering becomes data, it's very hard to come back. The finale leaves one last door cracked open. What if Manousos isn't entirely wrong? What if there is a moment when the signal drops? And if that's true, what kind of monster do you have to become to force that moment into existence? Rick is the answer, and that's the real horror of the Pluribus Season 1 finale. The hive isn't the only thing that can take someone away. Sometimes it's a human who believes they're saving them and is willing to break bodies to prove it.